I'm always so pleased to welcome my next guest back to the show because in addition to being a super nice guy, I always learn so much when I speak with Jack Cashill. Jack, how are you?
I am well. How about yourself, Jason?
All things considered, I'm doing well as well. It's great to have
Well,
you back. And of course, you've got your book. It's been out for a little while. We spoke about it last time that you were here, but I know it's a book that most people should read. And you've just redesigned your website, Cashill.com. I'm talking
right.
about unmasking Obama, and we're going to be talking about a wide range of things today. What, Jack, you wrote an article recently talking about the weaponization of the media by the CIA, specifically against General Flynn, but it seems that it's been weaponized against President Trump and anyone who supports him.
Right. In fact, the subtitle of my book is "The Fight to Tell the True Story of a Failed Presidency," and "Unmasking Obama" just came out last week. So this is one of my
Ah,
first interviews,
oh, great.
at least post publication. The heroes of my book, and I like to tell positive stories, are those people who fought against not only the deep state and the Democratic Party, but also the major media to tell the truth. For 8 years of Obama's presidency, the media did all they could to suppress any story that reflected badly on the president. And so what they did was they left major stories on the table for people like myself, and I celebrate the stories of probably 40 other independent journalists in the course of the book. I refer to them collectively as the samizdat, which was the Soviet term of the Russian term for the underground in the Soviet Union that circulated the truth and the true stories. I mean, that's how Solzhenitsyn got published, or even Boris Pasternak and
Right.
and lesser authors.
Hmm.
The Which leads to the quip, the difference between Pravda, which was the big Soviet organ, and the New York Times.
Yeah,
You know what it is?
not much.
Pravda readers knew they were being lied to.
That is so funny that you say that, Jack, because I was married to a Ukrainian woman at one point, and she would say the same thing. She would tell me, you Americans are so stupid. At least in Russia, they know the KGB is going to kill you if you do something wrong. And she was ahead of her time because we've seen the FBI and the CIA target these individuals, maybe not kill them, but certainly General Flynn is being dragged through the judicial mud in a way that I certainly don't remember another person ever being.
And the reason he's being dragged through is because he was a potential truth teller. He was one of the few people to leave the Obama administration in dissent. He was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he thought the Iran deal was a disaster. I think it was too, probably do also.
Yeah.
Most thinking people do. But it was Obama's signature foreign policy achievement. And for him to be able to go out and to spread this word was problematic. So it leads to this incredibly ironic circumstance in that to frame Michael Flynn, they also, let's just call them the conspirators, because it involves not only the CIA and certain elements within the FBI, but also the major media.
Yeah.
They have to frame Russia, right? Now, Russia was indispensable to Obama's being able to pull off the Iran deal. And as late as, I believe it was April 2015, Obama was publicly praising Putin for his role in allowing this deal to come to pass. It wouldn't happen without him. And then just 6 months later, Michael Flynn is a traitor for talking to these same people that Obama was praising 6 months earlier.
Right.
And that is in the final chapter of my book, which is called The Eastern Front. I deal with the people who are trying to tell the truth about the whole Russia collusion scheme. And Michael Flynn was, in a sense, one of them. Even he never got the chance, but he would have been. And that was, the fear was sufficient to drive the media to attack him.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not, as we've said, it's not just the media. I mean, what's going on with Emmett Sullivan, a lot of legal experts didn't even imagine would be possible, certainly setting legal precedent. And as of yesterday, I believe, Michael Flynn is back in some jeopardy. He's back in Emmett Sullivan's court, and his plea deal will, I guess, the guilty plea will be enforced. Why do you think Emmett Sullivan is waiting until after the election? And if that's a legal question outside of your purview, we could ask Robert Mueller.
I think a lot of things are going to be held until after the election, including, I think, whatever Durham reports. Because right now, if he dropped a major bombshell, it wouldn't work for the Republicans, oddly, because the major media would consider it just a campaign smear.
Right.
And they would spend all day long distancing themselves from it, denouncing and everything else. The bottom line is this, and this is, I think our viewers have to be a little patient with the Department of Justice and the Trump administration, because here's what they're working with. Do you know what percent of the vote Donald Trump got in the District of Columbia in 2016?
Very low, I would think.
4%.
Wow.
4%. Now, these are the people who staff those bureaucracies.
Yeah.
So you may have Bill Barr on top of the Department of Justice, but 95% of the people working under him are working against him. It's just the reality that he faces, and the reality that Trump faced when he came to Washington. A lot of those people, of the 96%, some portion of them are Republicans who are no happier about seeing Trump elected than the Democrats were.
Yeah.
And so it's a constant battle. Trump will need a second term to clean this place out, to drain the swamp.
Yeah, I agree. And it's almost as if he's been strategizing to do that because, we haven't seen any action on the Clintons. I personally have been quite disappointed with William Barr. I was disappointed that he was appointed to Attorney General in the first place just because of his background with Iran-Contra. To what extent do you think that Bill Barr is in there to protect the surviving conspirators in the Iran-Contra case, Bill Clinton being one of the biggest ones?
I think that is all history, and I don't think Barr has. I don't think we'll ever see any action on that.
On what? The Clintons?
On Iran-Contra. I mean, it's
right.
For instance, what in my Flynn article, you see the connection I make with the author of the article that takes down Flynn in February of 2016. And this is what got me intrigued to tell the Flynn story. It was in February 2016 that Reuters decided to drop this bomb on Flynn and say that, yes, it was highly suspicious that he had this meeting with the Russians, and he sat at a dinner table with Putin. I mean, likely on a dais. I probably wasn't sitting next to him. Yeah. It wasn't. And then one of the author's names caught my eye. His name was Mark Hosenball.
Yeah.
And I had a run-in with Mark Hosenball about 15 years in 2003. I had written a book with James Sanders called First Strike about the destruction of TWA Flight 800 off the coast of Long Island in 1996. And our book came out in 2002 or 2003. And I visited with Hosenball and his writing partner, Michael Isikoff, in their Newsweek offices at the time. I just wanted to share the information we had. I wasn't trying to, even promote the book. I just wanted them to, here's the information we've gathered. And what we'd love to do is to have you follow up on it. And there's a Pulitzer Prize if you do. A Pulitzer Prize awaits the person who takes the information we've gathered and runs with it. Hosenball, then I realized, was the chief apologist for the CIA. And he had written an article, I probably should have checked this at the time, in which he takes the CIA photos, he takes the CIA analysis, he dismisses and denounces all conspiracy theorists who think that maybe a missile, maybe like the 258 eyewitnesses who saw a missile attacking the airplane, were all part of the conspiracy,
Right.
And he was as rude and as nasty to me as he could be. And Isikoff wasn't rude. He just blew me off, wasn't interested. And I said to him, Michael, I said, this is the greatest untold story of our time. I said, how about if you just read one chapter of the book? He says, no, I'll read 3 pages. Which 3 pages do you want me to read? I said, not one chapter? He goes, no, 3 pages. That's where their heads were at. They weren't interested in the story because it reflected badly on the Clinton administration because it took place just before re-election in 2016. It was Bill Clinton's Benghazi. It was the national security disaster that could have derailed his presidential campaign. And so when I saw Hosenball's name attached to the Flynn article, I started to do a little research on Hosenball. And what I found was really shocking. Hosenball went to England as a 17-year-old student. He's American. At the time, I thought he was British because he had a British accent. And I wrote about him having that. He said, you're so stupid, you don't even know that I'm American. Well, you had a British accent. My publicist was with me. He thought you were British, So he goes to Britain to school. Then he transfers back to Ireland, comes back to England probably about age 21 as a reporter. And for the next 4 years, he's working as a journalist in London. And then, and I think this would have been about 1976 or something, he gets thrown out of the country, all right?
For spying, right?
For spying. And I got a hold of the document in which the British justice system was unflinching and calling him a spy and throwing him out of the country. The story was sufficiently important that the New York Times reported on it, right?
Huh.
But no one, not the New York Times, and not even the documentation, there was a very certain care taking as to explain for whom was Mark Hosenball spying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if he had been spying for Russia or, Soviet Union or whatever, he would not have escaped. My suspicion is he was spying for the CIA.
Right.
And,
well, can I show you something interesting? I'm sorry to interrupt, Jack, but I just put in Hosenball, which is like, where to get that name? New York Times spy. So here we've got August 17th, former CIA officer arrested and charged with spying for China. Oh, so this is reporting by Hosenball, but interestingly, the page is no longer available.
Yeah, wow. Because the Times pages are almost always available.
Well, not this time.
And see, if he comes back to the United States, it didn't seem to diminish his career at all. But if he's reporting on the CIA, it's likely because he has access to the CIA,
Right.
And there he is in drag in the middle there, but that's another story.
I think it's a Lord and Taylor ad, but this is the article from 1976. American newsman told to quit Britain. Yeah. I mean, this is really pretty surprising.
Security, right?
At 25, Mark Hosenball is told to leave Britain. He's accused of spying. You see him in the early 2000s working for Newsweek. When I first started Crowdsource the Truth, it was in part prompted by a CNN interview with a Newsweek, I think, associate editor or something, a guy named Kurt Eichenwald. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on at Newsweek. What's the connection between Newsweek and the CIA?
That's a good question, because the other fellow I met with, who was a more prominent reporter, Michael Isikoff. Isikoff, a few years earlier, and I got to give Isikoff credit for what he's done, because he broke the Monica Lewinsky story.
Right.
And he tried to break it at the Washington Post, and he ended up having to leave the Post because he went public with his discontent. And I believe then Drudge picked it up, if you recall.
Right.
This was in 1998, early 1998. And then he ends up in Newsweek, which I think was owned by the Washington Post. It wasn't like he got, was totally thrown out of the empire. Mm-hmm. And Isikoff plays an interesting role in the Obamagate story as well, as you know. He plays a very key role in it, because they choose Isikoff in September of 2016 to meet with Christopher Steele. And it's he who first tells the story of the charges against Carter Page and the impending FISA application. And he also reports on Christopher Steele's allegations. Now, he's getting them directly from Christopher Steele. The FBI has exactly the same data he has. But then what the FBI does is they package Isikoff's article in that initial FISA application on October 16th as though it came from a totally independent source,
Right.
as though it were being confirmed by a mainstream journalist like Michael Isikoff, right? So as Matt Taibbi says, he's a renegade Rolling Stone reporter. He's a leftist who tells the truth. I mean, there's only a half a dozen of them left, maybe, if that many. Glenn Greenwald occasionally. I mean, there's few of them. But Isikoff says, for the media to be on any team is an embarrassment. For them to be on a team, FBI/CIA, is a disgrace. And that's what happened in 2016.
Isikoff says that, or Taibbi says that?
No. Taibbi says that.
Yeah.
In his book, I forget the name of his book, Hate Inc., I think it's called. He's a very good writer, and he's a truth teller. So, and the idea that the media would be collaborating with the FBI and the CIA to take down a duly elected president, and candidate before that, it's a new low in American journalist history. The history of journalism.
But Jack, is it new? Is it not really analogous to what happened in Watergate, which also involved the Washington Post? We just had a guest a week or two ago who wrote a book. John O'Connor wrote a book called Postgate about how the Washington Post lied about Watergate, covered up the identity of Deep Throat. What I wanted to get to, and I knew you were going to bring all this up because I've been following what you've been reporting on lately, and it's extremely interesting to me because we know from the Church Committee hearings in 1975 that the CIA had engaged in Operation Mockingbird, paying, manipulating, planting journalists in key news outlets to basically control the stories. Isn't that true?
Well, yeah, and if they do it overseas, it's one thing. If we're doing it against our enemies, it's one thing. But why not? Once you get that power, once you realize you can do, and why not turn it against your domestic opponents as well? And that's what we saw happen in 2016. And you're right about Watergate with one exception. The Watergate story we've been told is not the Watergate story that happened. It was a Kennedy inside job, and not
Kennedy?
JFK. What's that? Ted Kennedy and the really? Kennedy hangers-ons were deeply involved in that whole thing.
Really?
At every level. But the difference is that there was an actual crime at the heart of it, right?
Right.
This is one where you create the crime, which is another level of another deeper depth of depravity. Plus, you didn't really have, the CIA at that point was, Nixon was using the CIA as well. So it was a little more balance in the use of our intelligence services, Howard Hunt and all those people. And there is by the way, anyone who's interested in good, interesting histories, go back. There's a few good books on it, on Watergate, and the names of them don't come to me at the top of my head, but that story is being deconstructed slowly over time.
Yeah. Is it interesting at all, Jack, that the Saudi Arabian embassy is right next to the Watergate Hotel?
I don't know. So there's coincidences, and then there's coincidences.
But I want to stay on this for a minute because, a lot of people don't know about these church committee hearings. It's amazing to me that these things happened during my lifetime. I was a small child, of course, but things like the church committee hearings, the Weather Underground, it doesn't really seem like these problems necessarily went away, and now they've come back. You've written so much about Barack Obama, not just in your latest book, but he's been a focus of interest for you for quite some time. And when I was listening to this great interview that you did earlier this week, or just a couple days ago with Doug Hagman, you guys were talking a lot about Barack Obama's private army that started as Obama for America, then became Organizing for America. It occurred to me, Jack, that Obama was really, when history looks back, kind of America's first cyber warfare president. When he was elected, social media was It existed, but it was a very minor, teenagers were on Twitter. It
Right,
did not
right.
have the kind of influence that it has now. Obama was the very first president to ever actually send a tweet. And now we've heard that there are all kinds of sophisticated IIA tools, basically social engineering, artificial intelligence tools. And when you couple that with Obama's National Defense Authorization Act that updated and modernized the Smith-Mundt Act, we've now got that propaganda being used against people of the United States of America. And not just propaganda, because it's one thing to have a newsman stand in the Dallas police station and tell everybody Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK. It's another to turn these artificial intelligence tools against an unsuspecting public and really deeply deceive people, sometimes on a personal level. What do you think about this use of social media, social engineering, artificial intelligence? It seems like a problem.
It is a problem. And yet, what's curious about that, Jason, is that, Jack Dorsey, who is one of the founders of Twitter and CEO, after Trump was elected in 2016, said, if I had known this was going to get Donald Trump elected, I never would have invented it. Because even though it is their tool, the one they create, the one they manipulate, the one that they exploit, it's our best weapon because it allows us to go around them. The samizdat that I talk about, the independent journalists, one blogger called them us, because I'm part of it, you're part of it, a coalition of willing Lilliputians, right? And we need social media more than they do because it's the only way we get information. They have the major media. They could broadcast everything they want. They have, in 2016, look at the lineup. They had every single major newspaper in the country endorsing Hillary Clinton. Yeah. All the major magazines. Hell, they won't even put Melania on the cover. I'd buy the magazine if Melania was on the cover. They have all of Silicon Valley, all the social media, all of Hollywood, all of TV, all the major networks except Fox, and you can't even trust Fox. And we beat them,
Yeah.
And we beat them because of the samizdat, because of people like you and I, and even the people in your audience who take information and share it with a dozen friends. They're all part of that. We do that much better than they do because we have real information, and they're just sending stupid memes to each other that are so transparently false that they don't even believe them,
Yeah. I think it's a bit more sinister. Perhaps I'm being cynical, but I believe that this Operation Mockingbird is still in effect. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on today. I think people need to go back and look at this. Everybody is very focused on congressional committees that are investigating Donald Trump. But this Frank Church committee was directly interviewing William Colby, the CIA director. I never saw this photograph of George H.W. Bush nervously nibbling on the temple of his glasses as Colby answers questions about a heart attack gun that the CIA had, this program where they were manipulating journalists. Have we ever heard exactly which journalists were part of this operation?
If we have, I don't know. That's not something I know. You're right, though, that it was the CIA got out of control for a while. I mean, and you're in a sense allied with the Cosa Nostra in an attempt to knock off Fidel Castro. That is something that ought to be monitored.
Right.
And when you're, for instance, organizing a secret army to attack Cuba, and it ended disastrously. That's something we ought to know about. And the Church Committee, I think, was on the right. They had the right idea, except how compromised these Senate committees are, and we've seen this, for instance, and this is a classic example of the way Washington works with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. This seems like a minor story, but it's so classically House of Cards Washington. The security chief, James Wolfe, is the only person who gets to see the FISA application other than the two heads of the committee, the Democratic and Republican head of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Even the other members don't get to see it. But he shares it with his girlfriend, who just happens to be a reporter, Allie Watkins. Right?
Oh, boy, yeah.
And she's an intern. And what happens to Allie Watkins? Where is she today?
Still at the Times.
At the New York Times. She gets promoted. Right. It's like, you're compromising state secrets. You're doing. Then Wolf gets what? Gets like 30 days community service or something. He's like, you got the Sandy Berger treatment.
Right.
When Democrats are caught with their hand in a cookie jar, that DOJ is so loaded from top to bottom with operatives. It's very difficult for the people at the top, even if the Republicans, especially if the Republicans, to get any kind of justice. And it's frustrating when you watch it from the outside. And yet we have to keep pushing and prodding and poking and hoping for the best. And there's a darker thing going on too. And I look at less at the technology, Jason, than at the mindset. And I talked about this with Doug the other day. The switch from liberalism to progressivism, which happened on Obama's watch. And a liberal, and I'm taking them at their own best sense, a liberal sees himself as Atticus Finch standing in front of the doorway, demanding, due process, demanding innocent until proven guilty, demanding, justice before the law. And the mob out front are the evil people who just want the head of Tom Robinson, right?
Yeah.
Well, today there is no Atticus Finch in the Democratic Party. They're the mob out front demanding the head of Donald Trump, of Darren Wilson, of George Zimmerman, of the Minneapolis Four, of Kyle Rittenhouse, whoever is the target of the day. They just, they drag him before the NBA Court of Justice and let LeBron James decide what his fate should be.
Right. Yeah.
Atticus Finch is a liberal. There are no more Atticus Finches in that party.
There may be a true, Jack, that it transcends bipartisan politics. It's not just when Republicans do something, they get in trouble and Democrats don't. It's people who are connected to this deep state, this basically underground secret government of bureaucrats who remain there for decades, no matter who the president might be. And when you were talking about the Intelligence Committee, I think this is an important thing for us to talk about again, because we're talking about Democrats versus Republicans. Aren't there a lot of things that indicate, Jack, that these intelligence oversight committees have in fact been infiltrated by the intelligence communities and are used as a tool by them?
I have no trust in, it was Senator Burr from North Carolina, who I think is totally compromised and generally useless. He's the Republican. And I know Mark Warner, is totally compromised. So it's hard to put a lot of confidence in him. And let's face it, if you come to Washington with a skeleton
in
your
coming
closet,
out of the closet, yeah,
no, it won't come out. It'll be held over your head.
Right. And
that is why, in a sense, and Republicans are in many ways more vulnerable because the media will run with it. They'll exploit that. Look at this, right? That was, I'm sorry, you've got to be squeaky clean if you're a Republican to get through to have any value at all,
Yeah.
And then even if you are, the Republican establishment may take you out because you're too straight, and we've seen examples of that. I know people personally, who were too good for the Republican establishment, too pure, too conservative, too consistent.
And you never shy away from touching what most people would consider journalistic third rails in terms of Obama's personal communications about his, let's call it experimentation with bisexuality and other taboo topics. But it seems like whenever you try to discuss something like this, whether it's a topic like that or questioning the evidence in the Kennedy assassination, did Oswald shoot? Could he have possibly have acted alone? Did TWA 800 explode due to an explosion in a fuel tank? How did all these people say there was a missile? And I mean, you question these things and immediately you just get branded a conspiracy theorist and debunked, and that gets published, and there's no need to provide countermanding evidence or get involved in any kind of intelligent debate. They just smear.
No, that's an excellent explanation, Jason, what happens. I've written a dozen books over the last 20 years, and I'm cautioned by including with my Unmasking Obama book. I am cautioned by, people in high places, high media places. If you talk about Obama's bisexuality, which I do, you're making it very difficult for us to put you on the air. And yet, when my evidence is overwhelming, including letters written by Barack Obama himself, which is and then I see what, I was reluctant a little bit to talk about the Larry Sinclair press conference in which he claimed a 2-night drug and gay sex stand with Obama back in the late 90s. But then I think if he was the Stormy Daniels of his day, right?
Right.
He was the Christine Blasey Ford of his day. If we could drag their people, they could drag their people out. Why can't I drag ours? I mean, unlike Stormy Daniels, Larry Sinclair hired a room at the National Press Club and gave a press conference. And he provided all the details, a list of details, and challenged reporters to follow up on them. Names, places, phone numbers. All they had to do was follow up. Instead, of course, they attacked him and they attacked anyone who dared report on the story.
Nobody followed up, did they?
No. So in that, the bestseller of that campaign, Game Change by Heilman and the other guy, they sound like the guys in Nixon's cabinet. I forget their names. Halperin and Halperin, I think, and Heilman. And the book is called Game Change. It's a very, very good book, very detailed book about the 2008 election cycle. They don't even mention Larry Sinclair, and Sinclair's a little nuts. I'll give him that. But I think he was telling the truth. He's a Facebook friend of mine, by the way.
Wow. Well, I mean, he said he had text messages, and he seems credible in what he's saying. I mean, it's amazing that people don't look into this stuff. I mean, that's basically what they do. They've got a narrative that they want everyone to believe, and it doesn't have any connection to facts or evidence. And the second you attempt to countermand it, they just turn on a louder bullhorn against you. I don't know if you've heard this, Jack, but we're broadcasting now to a slightly limited audience because there's been a strike on my main YouTube channel from the president of the Emmy Awards. And it's interesting because this is the guy who's in charge of the news Emmys and the documentary film Emmys. His father won Emmy Awards for reporting that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy. And when we look at a contemporary newsman, a journalist who was working for the Dallas Morning News by the name of Jim Mars, well, he spent his whole entire career exploring the evidence that the Warren Commission missed, and he was marginalized. He was called a conspiracy theorist. He died in relative obscurity, never having won an Emmy Award. To what extent, Jack, our topic today is how the media has been used by the CIA to smear, in this particular instance, General Flynn. But I don't know if people necessarily realize it's not just limited to the mainstream media news. It's this entertainment media and things like the Emmy Awards that are sort of anointing the selected people who are your trusted journalists, who are, Don Lemon won an Emmy Award. What do you think about this, these mechanisms of control?
Well, I know them well because I also make documentaries, and I've made several on non-political subjects, that are just, good-hearted, mid-American kind of success story kind of things. And I know that whenever I submitted them to any kind of awards contest, I had no chance because they just Googled my name,
Exactly.
I had no chance. And I also write, I'm the executive editor of a regional business magazine. I write a monthly column. And my publishers always want to say, Jack, you have the best columns in I know I could, my columns are so much better than anyone else that anyone's writing. And I even tailor them for a business audience so they're not, conspiratorial or anything. And I said, don't even bother submitting them. They're being judged by the University of Missouri School of Journalism. They're going to look up who I am if they don't know already. They're saying, or the topic is going to excuse to the right in a kind of a, benign way. No, you don't have any chance of winning anything.
Yeah.
It's almost comical. You just have to deal with it. And the beauty of it, Jason, and this is where I take some solace, is that, okay, I'm a guy, semi-obscure. I have some advantages over other people in our world, and I have a PhD from, a good university. And I also I don't mean to say this boastingly. It's just a fact. I write very well. I write better than 95% of the people in the mainstream media. And so they can't just dismiss me. And I also stick to the evidence. I don't get beyond my evidence. So they have a harder time dismissing me, but they still dismiss me, because I'm a loose cannon, because I'm a conspiracy theorist, So but I'd rather be that, because how do I get to write the story, the definitive story of TWA Flight 800, right? I broke the story of Bill Ayer's involvement in the writing of Dreams from My Father.
Yeah, with forensic investigation. I love that.
And it was backed up a year later by a celebrity biographer, Christopher Anderson. Andrew Breitbart, was the one guy in the media brave enough to second it. As did Andy McCarthy, by the way, of National Review, and they paid for it because they got attacked. Breitbart didn't care; McCarthy had to. So when they leave huge stories. I wrote the definitive history of Ron Brown, the former Commerce Secretary killed in a plane crash. I don't get to write these stories unless the major media ignores them. So from a personal perspective, even though I'm not getting rich doing this, by the way, people say, well, you're just in it for the money. No, I would have stayed in advertising if I was in it for the money.
Right.
That's where I made my money. So
yeah, this is a good way to get marginalized
cobbling
and
together
harassed.
Projects to buy, So,
yeah. You certainly don't go into this type of controversial writing and journalism to make money. It's a good way to get harassed and marginalized. And it takes me to my next question, because, there are a lot of journalists, authors throughout recent history. I'm thinking immediately of Christopher Ruddy, who wrote the book, The Strange Death of Vince Foster.
Right,
and
sure.
I mean, that was a really well-written book, just as you do. He basically conducted essentially a police detective's investigation, presenting evidence that would be sufficient to draw an indictment and, frankly, incarcerate somebody. We've got this evidence that the guy did not kill himself. That's prima facie irrefutable, no countermanding evidence presented. They just say it's a conspiracy theory. Yet somehow, years later, we see Christopher Ruddy photographed smiling with Bill Clinton, and the Clintons apparently, or he gave money to the Clinton Foundation, and now he's got Newsmax. What do we think about that?
I don't know what to make of Christopher Ruddy. I've never met him. I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. I wanted to do a project on, there he is. I know he donated to either the Clinton campaign or the foundation.
Seems
and yet
weird.
Newsmax continues to do good stuff. And he has a fair amount of money because he's running this TV studio out of New York, or was, at least the last time I was there. And so I was there to do something with Steve Malzberg, who's a good straight shooting guy, So I don't know. And his work on Vince Foster was great. I've been to Fort Marcy Park a couple times. You tell a liberal that, and they don't even know where Fort Marcy Park is.
Right.
And let me just tell one quick little story here. It's an anecdote. It's a little digression, but it speaks to the state of the American media. This is in the late 1990s. I live in Kansas City. Okay, I'm the executive editor of Regional Business Magazine, so I have some level of respectability in that city. I have a neighbor who lives a couple blocks away who's the editor and publisher of the Kansas City Star, right? So I'm out for a walk one day, and I run into him. He's out walking his dog, and I have a hat on that says U.S. Park Police, right? And he says, "What's with the U.S. Park Police hat?" I said, it's my memorial Vince Foster memorial hat, Actually, a friend of mine had gotten it for me for that reason. And he said, "Oh, you're not one of those people who believe that Vince Foster was murdered, are you?" I said to him, this is what I said to him. I said, Art, I've looked at the evidence very thoroughly, and I'd say, here's what I believe. I do not believe that Vince Foster died where they found him. Here's what he does. He puts his hands over his ears and walks away saying, I don't want to hear this. 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 He's the editor of the Kansas City Star.
That's amazing. It's one of these hot button topics that, that's not an atypical reaction. It's one of these things that is immediately just categorized as a conspiracy theory, but there is so much compelling evidence that, as you said, very least, the story they've told us cannot possibly be true. In the Chris Ruddy documentary, which I think I saw on Canadian Broadcasting, they point out that the gun that was found in his hand is made up of the parts of 2 different serial numbers. The 2 independent investigators that Ruddy got involved said that collectively they'd done 30 investigations of gun-and-mouth suicides. And although it wasn't impossible, they had never before seen a situation where the gun remained in the dead guy's hand because the explosive recoil of the gun, coupled with the shooter being dead, caused it to go flying. Not to mention there's blood running in multiple directions. I just find it so interesting that anyone who attempts to open this can of worms, very much like Lee Harvey Oswald, you're tapping on a thread that could kind of unravel the whole entire sweater.
That's right. And, I had one of the times I visited Fort Marcy Park, I went with John Clark, who was the attorney for the fellow who was the eyewitness.
Oh, right.
Who was harassed.
Urinating or something?
And he saw the cars, the strange Arkansas plates and stuff. And, they were both Democrats, Clark and this other guy. But they were both straight shooters. And the other guy was harassed by the FBI in ways that just make no sense at all. And oddly, in the books I write, I like to tell positive stories. I like to tell about the people who are fighting the system rather than just the system itself, because those books I find depressing. So I was thinking of doing a book on Vince Foster or a documentary. Yeah. And I said, but here's what I need to start. I need someone on the inside. And the person I wanted was one of Vince Foster's sons, right? Ooh. I said, if I'm a son and I think my father's been murdered, that's my life's crusade, right? To find the killer and bring him to justice. So I finally got a hold of one of the sons, and he treated me like a Jehovah's Witness coming to his door, but worse.
Really?
He had wanted nothing to do with it, nothing to do with me. Go away, get out of my life. Total hostility. So I let it drop because I didn't have an inside way to that story that would have, opened the door that hadn't previously been opened.
But don't you think, Jack, if along the lines of what you're saying, if someone knows that their parent was murdered and perhaps has been contacted by a representative of that murderer saying, you got another parent, you got some brothers and sisters, don't talk to anybody. It's a similar response. I mean, people who have told me they've spoken with Lee Harvey Oswald's family, they don't want to talk about it too much either.
Well, I'm going to give you a contemporary example because it's in my book as well on Masking Obama. And that's the Seth Rich story.
Right.
Now, this is the story of our time. And the media's avoidance of this is not shocking. We're not shocked anymore. It's just become typical. Seth Rich, for those who do not know, was a data analyst for the Democratic National Committee, and he was shot and killed at like 4 a.m. on a Washington street, and shot in the back twice, beaten up beforehand, and he wasn't robbed, right? I mean, his wallet, his phone, his watch were all left on his person. And so it was reported the next day. The details were reported by the local media. And then 2 weeks later, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks fame gets on Dutch TV and just casually drops it that starts talking about Seth Rich's death, implying that Seth Rich was his source. He didn't say it out, but he implied it, right? And that set off a whirlwind and the major, in terms of, what it set in motion was the major media's attempt to squash the story and attempts on the right to tell the story, because it's so critical. Because if Seth Rich was the source of the WikiLeaks documents from Hillary and Podesta's email accounts, right, there's no Russia collusion story. That whole story is bogus. The whole notion of the Russians hacking the computers and taking these and feeding them WikiLeaks. This is a fairy tale. There's no evidence for this. The FBI never even were not even allowed to look at the DNC servers.
Right.
So the story gets more interesting than that, and I talk about this in the book. The day after the election in 2016, there's a journalist named Ellen Ratner who is, sort of a B-level journalist, but she's been on TV here and there. She's a Hillary supporter, but not crazy. She's speaking at a panel at Emory University. It's as obscure a panel as it could be. There's some ex-Republican congressman there who's a total waste of time, and someone else. And she mentions that she had met with Julian Assange the last time she was in London, because her late brother, Michael Ratner, had been his attorney. Her brother was a radical leftist. And she just sort of dropped offhandedly an hour into the conversation that Assange told her that his sources came from within the Democratic National Committee, that there was no hack, and she doesn't mention the Riches by name, not at least on the air. But she tells another fellow, actually a business analyst named Ed Butowski, about it. And she tells him that not only did Assange say they were from inside the DNC, but his sources were Seth Rich and his brother Aaron Rich, right? And so Ratner then goes to the Rich family, because Butowski goes to the Rich family,
right,
and asks them their help and to hire an investigator and so on and so forth. They do. He does. And then the whole world comes down on Butowski and everyone involved in the story, including Fox News. Anyone who tries to tell that story then becomes a suspect. And Butowski's being sued. He's suing back. Fox News was sued. Now, the parents, just to the point you were saying, who seemed in the beginning interested in getting at the truth of what happened to their son, they still don't know, all of a sudden backed off. And I suspect what caused them to back off was fear. I think they were trying to protect their other son, Aaron. And it's a strange story. And what's frustrating about it, Jason, is the major media not only don't want to tell this story, they don't want you and me to tell this story.
Well, not only that, you've just amazingly taken me right to my next topic I want to talk to you about, Jack, because although there are aspects of this Seth Rich story that you and I agree on, there are others that I have some different opinions about. And it's not just the major media anymore. Obviously, we had William Colby tell us about Operation Mockingbird, and you accurately mentioned that Twitter and YouTube and all these other things, we're sort of conducting a little bit of internet jujitsu here to use these tools. I certainly couldn't build a worldwide video distribution network without Google, and Google doesn't want me interviewing people like you talking about stuff like this. But it seems like we are in the midst of Operation Mocking Tube, that there are social media personalities who have been inserted into this sort of ecosystem to spread disinformation, to deflect people who want to find the honest truth from it. And it's very difficult to know who may or may not be on the right side of this. It kind of takes me back to Michael Isikoff, because you mentioned that, this is the guy who broke the Monica Lewinsky story. And so in a manner somewhat similar to Christopher Ruddy, you would think he's an enemy of the Clintons, but yet now, somehow, he's been enlisted to meet with this British spy who quite clearly had a premeditated plan to distribute this obviously false story that has led to 4 years of stagnation, essentially, in the executive branch of our government, and basically led to essentially civil war in the streets. Is it happening that when you reach a level of effectiveness where somebody grabs you and says, look, we got your coffin in this hand and we got $1 million a year job in this other hand. Which do you want?
Right. I would not be surprised at all. I have not reached that level.
Neither have I. I'm still on the getting sued to death level.
I have people ask me all the time, watch your back. I said, I feel really safe because the last thing anyone wants is for something to happen to me. And they can ignore me. I know they do. Um, I can make my way up the media chain to a certain point. For instance, my first Flight 800 book, I was talking to Bob Woodward. We had several conversations. And Bob Woodward, though, probably got someone said to him, Bob, this is not a story you want to mess with. He was former Navy intelligence anyhow. So
I was going to say, I think Bob Woodward is the guy who calls and says, "Hey, do you know this dude Jack? Go have somebody take a look at it." I don't trust Bob Woodward.
No, I don't trust him at all. But he has a level of visibility that I don't have. And if he wrote a book about TWA Flight 800, he would. It would be cause for concern among. I think he would have reason to fear for his life. Now, the one guy who did write a book about 800 did it in a novel form, Nelson DeMille, and he wrote a bestseller. It's a hell of a book called Nightfall. And he and I are on the same page. And DeMille is a very sophisticated guy with great inside sources. So that's as close to getting that story out as we could. We've been, James Sanders in particular, my writing partner on the first book, and we're still in touch. We've both been approached by Hollywood several times. And, but nothing ever gets off the ground. Not to use an airplane metaphor, but nothing does. And
I've got sorry to interrupt, but I've got some experience with that. And very often, if someone like you who is sitting on an important story that they don't want anything to happen with, they can make relatively small deals or even offers, tie you up in these, turnaround.
Right.
Basically get you locked into a contract to not sell it to anybody else for a certain period of time and then drop it. And they can do this, after a couple of those contracts, before you know it, 10, 15 years have gone by. And
it's those, and it's frustrating because, especially during the lockdown, we're all forced to watch a whole lot of TV. You think, okay, if you're Netflix now, you're really beginning to struggle against, Amazon Prime and whatnot. And if you're HBO, forget about it. You're already in, last place. Why not reach out to that half of the audience you've been slighting for the last 20 years, And I once met with the head of programming for HBO, and she was a young woman about 30. Mm-hmm. And she was as obnoxious and dismissive as a person could be, and as full of herself. It was very frustrating, to talk to her. And every third word was the F-bomb. Okay, honey,
wow.
You're sophisticated. Okay, great. Why not? Come on, we're out here, guys. We got 50% of your audience or more,
Well, I think it's interesting that you're describing a similar reaction to what you had from Hosenball. Perhaps it's just a matter of, you're talking about stuff that they want you to feel discouraged when you leave that meeting. And there's no need for somebody to be rude to you, although that's also not anomalous for Hollywood type people to act that way. It takes me back to all of your writing about Bill Ayers and Barack Obama. This is a really, truly interesting story, and people need to know more about it. Just like Watergate, I don't think enough people today have a good understanding of what the Weather Underground was all about. And, when I was listening to your interview with Doug Hagman, you guys touched on this a bit. But, Jack, isn't it safe to say that the Weather Underground actually never went away? It just went deeper underground. And it seems that some of these elements of the FBI that we've been talking about perhaps even helped them. A lot of the things that we see tying up Michael Flynn have remarkable similarities to FBI behavior that allowed Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn to go free. It seems like they can do this type of illegal wiretap, and if they wanted to jam the target up, they ignore the fact that it was illegal, and if they wanted to let the person off, they say, oh, well, this evidence is inadmissible because it's an illegal wiretap.
That's pretty much what happened with Ayers. I'm a little older than you, so I remember this era, and the bombings, and I should say, younger viewers who think that this year is anomalous. It is anomalous, by the way. It's the craziest, stupidest year in American history. But in terms of violence, no, it was more violent in the late 60s and early 70s. They, especially in terms of bombing. I mean, they were bombing all kinds of stuff. And when the thing that set back that movement was when they, I think you're pointing to it here, is where they blew themselves up in a Greenwich Village townhouse. Mm-hmm. But their goal that day was to build a bomb, to take it to a non-com dance at Fort Dix and set it off, which might have killed, 50 to 100 soldiers in their dates, which would have made being friends with Bill Ayers taboo,
to say the least.
And David Garrow, who's an interesting character, Pulitzer Prize-winning civil rights historian, he writes a book in 2017 called Rising Star, an exhaustive look at Obama's early years. I don't know why I bothered writing it, but and he's a Obama critic from the left. But what he acknowledges is that Bill Ayers and Obama used to have dinner almost every night. The Ayerses and the Obamas and Rashid Khalidi, their other neighbor. That they were. This is up to the time Obama runs for U.S. Senate. He wasn't just some guy in a neighborhood. They were close associates, And as I know, they were also writing partners. But so when Garrow's book comes out, and Garrow is also the one who reveals Obama's his professed bisexuality, and it doesn't come out in a hardcover. That letter is not in a hardcover, but It is in the paperback, and that's where I found it. And then I contacted Garrow, and he honestly told me how it came to be, and that is that the woman who shared the letter with him redacted that part of it, and then she went on and sold the letters to Emory University. He's a good reporter. I got to give him credit for this. And then he went to Emory University and got the letter.
Yeah.
And so it comes out in the paperback. It should have been a headline story, and it wasn't. And then, so when I reported it, and I ran an article with it, it got a huge response, but it also told the people in the production booths up in Fox News, now maybe we don't want to talk to this guy, So it's a double-edged sword, Yeah. You tell the truth and you limit your sales.
Well, right, because we've got these gatekeepers who want to win their Emmy Awards and prevent people from talking about explosive, literally, stories like this. Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn are lauded as, radical leaders, 60s revolutionaries.
Oh, yeah, sure. Right.
Now they're academics.
And by the way, and you might want to put a picture of this, Bernardine Dorn was the last truly hot revolutionary. She was the star when they came out. Bill Ayers, I wasn't even aware of Bill Ayers. You get a full-on shot of Bernardine and her.
Well, but it's important that we talk about this for a second because not to be sexist, but obviously attractive women are used to advertise things all the time, and having a beautiful young woman be the face of a revolution might attract young men, might make people take interest. It's a bit of a similar tactic to what they're doing with Ocasio-Cortez, perhaps.
Right, that's right.
And I think Bernardine Dorn is a dangerous psychopath who has engaged in a lot of deadly activities that should be publicized. I've seen a couple videos where people sort of like approach her at events, and the people around get angry if you ask her about this. How could Northwestern University and the University of Chicago hire these people? They've been involved in murders. We've got Andrew Cuomo commuting the sentence of, what's her name? Kathy, I forget the woman's name, who was driving the getaway truck from the Brinks robbery.
The Brinks robbery, yeah. You're right. And then here's Dorn, when she first comes out, it's about 1970, with her fork salute. And you remember the fork salute?
That's from stabbing Sharon Tate and killing her baby.
Yeah, right.
And people go and listen to lectures from this woman at a college. Right. It's absolutely unbelievable. And we've got this woman, Susan Rosenberg, who we've spoken about quite a bit with Charles Ortel, who's now directly involved in Thousand Currents, which is basically collecting collecting money for Black Lives Matter. So the question is, isn't Black Lives Matter, Jack, the modern incarnation of the Weather Underground. They've professed their love and allegiance to Assata Shakur, Judith Clark, that's the woman whose sentence was commuted by Andrew Cuomo. I mean, essentially, Andrew Cuomo, Barack Obama, all of these guys are weathermen. Barack Obama, in my view, represents the victory of the Weather Underground. They infiltrated the U.S. government at the top. Now this organizing for America is really organizing against America. You've said it's Obama's private army, and I think they're enabled with cyber warfare tools against the people of the United States.
Well, the last world leader to have his own private army was Adolf Hitler. You know, I mean, think of it. He had the SA, I forget the Sturmenfront or whatever it's called. We know what happened to them. I mean, private armies only get to go so far, you know, before someone and authority decides they've gone far enough, you know. So,
wow, look at that logo. I'll tell you, it's amazing. Jack, we could speak for hours, but I know you're busy and we're just about out of time. I want to make sure that people are aware that your website, Cashill.com, has just been updated. Beautifully designed site. People can purchase the new book, Unmasking Obama, and you can get that from Amazon.com or other book retailers, perhaps, that aren't controlled by the CIA. Jack, any last words before we wrap it up?
No, hey, Jason, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and let's do this again sometime, okay?
Absolutely, and I want to talk to you about that Vince Foster book. I would love to be involved.
And all your audience in the Samizdat, tell them to spread the word and keep on talking and keep on fighting. Okay?
Absolutely. And I hope everybody will stay tuned. I'm going to be back in just 1 hour with Larry Nichols. He's feeling better and he's got some important information for us. I'll see everybody soon. Thanks for watching.